Welcome back. Let's continue from our last video. From within the fiery red flames, a phoenix gradually took form. The phoenix spoke, identifying Leo as a child of the Zerdinger family and recognizing the scent of Reina's flames. Hearing this, Leo immediately asked if the phoenix knew his mother. This question surprised the phoenix for a moment, but after a brief pause, it nodded and confirmed that she did. The great phoenix, Farina, fixed her ancient gaze upon Leo. Your mother, the sound was like rustling flames. That is not incorrect, she stated simply. She continued, a note of reflection entering her voice, that if she had ever borne a child, they would be approximately Leo's age now. Then her eyes seemed to twinkle with knowing. Do I know your mother? She asked, though it was clearly rhetorical, before answering with absolute certainty, of course I do. I owe Reina a significant debt. The sea of fire slowly vanished, and a true phoenix, Farina, one of the 3 mythical summons, appeared before Leo. The phoenix looked at Leo, then calmly introduced herself as Farina. Hearing her say this, Leo responded by introducing himself as Leo Plav and asking about her relationship with his mother and the debt she mentioned. The phoenix Farina nodded and explained that Reina had saved the life of her summoner, Ellen Lunda. Upon hearing that name, Leo's eyes widened as he recognized it as the hero Ellen Lunda. Ignoring Leo's expression, Farina continued her account. Ellen had been conquering a dungeon in Siren when she lost all her comrades and was on the verge of losing her own life. Then his mother had appeared and rescued her. In the process, Reina lost her brilliant aura, a sacrifice that prevented her from becoming a hero. Hearing the phoenix's words, Leo slightly lowered his head, quietly murmuring, "Mother." After what felt like a very long time, Leo suddenly spoke up, saying that his mother had stated she did not regret her actions. Farina chuckled upon hearing this, agreeing that Reina was indeed that kind of person. Looking somewhat confused, Leo asked why she was in Lumene. The phoenix Farina shook its head at this question, stating that she could not reveal that reason. She then asked Leo what he was doing on the island if he was not a knight. Leo honestly replied that he was studying summoning. Hearing this, the phoenix Farina exclaimed in shock, her eyes widening. She examined Leo from head to toe, then laughed and declared it was interesting and must be fate. Addressing him by name, she announced that she could finally repay her debt to his mother, and instructed him to reach out and take something. Following the phoenix's instructions, Leo extended his hand and a flame suddenly ignited in his palm. After a moment, the flames subsided, revealing an egg in Leo's hand. The phoenix Farina explained that this was her child. She expressed hope that one day, when he became a great summoner, he would form a contract with it, noting that it was a fortunate destiny for a summoner to be chosen to receive it. Hearing the phoenix Farina's words, Leo asked if he could attempt the contract now. The phoenix Farina, thinking she had misunderstood, asked him to repeat himself. As soon as she spoke, Leo, across from her, had already begun the process. Seeing this, the phoenix Farina urgently warned him it was too early and could cost him his life, pleading with him to stop. Leo paid little attention to the phoenix Farina's warnings and continued with the contract. Seeing his determination, the phoenix Farina spoke helplessly, realizing it was too late. She commented that his willingness to challenge the impossible without flinching reminded her of Reina and wished him good luck. An unknown amount of time passed. Where Leo stood was now enveloped in darkness, with only a small flame burning in front of him. Leo reached out and slowly touched the flame. At that moment, the small flame suddenly burst into fierce life, the red flames rushing to engulf Leo's body. Feeling the incredible heat, a sweating Leo thought about the intensity of the heat, realizing he could barely breathe. This was the phoenix flame, the result of burning the body to release powerful flames. He contemplated the pain endured by a living creature regenerating burned flesh for all eternity, understanding that pain and hurting along with it. Time passed slowly. The flames around Leo gradually faded and the phoenix egg reappeared in his hand. The eggshell cracked, a small fissure appearing. Leo's gaze fell slightly as he focused intently on the egg in his hand. The phoenix egg slowly rose, floating in the air. Beams of red light escaped from the cracks on the eggshell, causing one corner of the forest to glow red. Seeing this, the phoenix Farina exclaimed that he had succeeded. Leo wiped the sweat from his face, took a breath, and smiled, stating that he had done it. The phoenix Farina, narrowing its eyes, praised him happily, calling him a true genius and predicting he would become the greatest summoner in the world. As soon as she finished speaking, the egg in the air shook violently. The phoenix Farina spoke again, congratulating Leo on successfully signing the contract. A small phoenix hatched from the egg. The phoenix Farina also transformed into her human form and held her child, introducing her as Fiora, one of the 3 mythical summons. In human form, the phoenix Farina smiled at Leo, entrusting her child to him. Looking at the small creature in Farina's hand, Leo thought to himself, questioning if that really was a phoenix as it resembled a baby chick. As he was having this thought, Fiora, in her mother's hand, suddenly chirped. Hearing that, Leo became even more certain that it was indeed a baby chick. Meanwhile, outside Summoning Island, the students were showing their tamed summons to their teacher, Yura. Yura nodded, smiled, and praised them, commenting that a banana wombat was cute. As she finished, Yura turned her head and asked Carlo for the time. Carlo held up a hand and smiled, indicating there were 5 more minutes. Hearing this, Yura thought there were still 4 more students expected back. Just as she finished thinking, a loud commotion came from a distance. A giant bear rushed out of the forest, and on its back sat Xia. She leaned out and asked with a smile if it was not over yet, Professor. Seeing her, Yura was slightly surprised that she had tamed a small water bear, calling it impressive for a future knight. Xia, hearing this, jumped off the bear with excitement. Simultaneously, a large black shadow appeared in the sky. Walden, clinging to the leg of a giant crow, slowly descended to the ground. Seeing this, Yura noted that he had tamed a dark raven, something even famous summoning families struggled to achieve. Hearing her comment, Walden honestly replied that he had not signed a contract yet. Yura, hearing this, did not scold him but instead stated that it was enough, more than enough achievement. A moment later, Eliza returned, sitting elegantly on the head of a white snake. With her arms crossed, she slowly stated that she had signed a contract with it because her family did not possess a summon of this kind. Yura nodded and stated approvingly, identifying it as a Ran Gorgon and calling it excellent. As she was speaking, Carlo, nearby, called out that the time was up, Professor. As he said this, he paused for a moment and glanced into the distance, then stated excitedly that it was perfect timing as the last student was back. Following Carlo's words, everyone looked towards the forest behind them. They saw Leo slowly walk out, and the baby phoenix Fiora was sitting neatly on his head. The students around them began to laugh, pointing and mocking him, asking what that was and if he had tamed a chicken, calling him an idiot and suggesting he must have given up after realizing his lack of talent in summoning. But at this moment, Yura, observing the situation, her eyes became sharp. She looked closer at the creature on Leo's head. Then, unable to believe it, she cursed under her breath, realizing that it was a phoenix. The sun was setting as the students left Summoning Island and returned to the school. When Leo arrived back at the academy, instead of heading to his dormitory, he went to the entrance of the teacher's room. He quickly adjusted his clothes, then raised his fist and knocked on the door. A voice from inside invited him in. Leo pushed the door open and entered. Yura, who had been looking at documents in the room, looked up and smiled, stating that she heard he was looking for her and inviting him to sit down. After Leo took a seat, Yura continued speaking. She told Leo that this was the first time she had ever seen a baby phoenix. She added that she had not even known there was a phoenix on Summoning Island, and that a new student signing a contract with a phoenix was an unprecedented event in the history of the academy. Hearing her say this, Leo was startled. He quickly looked up and exclaimed, asking if she knew, placing both hands on the table. She looked directly into Leo's eyes and stated seriously that she knew who he truly was. Addressing him as Leo Plav, Yura then placed her hands firmly on the table, lowered her head slightly, and reiterated that she thought she knew his identity. Hearing this, Leo suddenly clenched his jaw as he wondered how he should respond. Unexpectedly, Yura wrapped her arms around him, then pushed him away, exclaiming happily that he was a summoning genius, an unprecedented genius. She wanted to praise him for his achievement, but she believed the fact that he had signed a contract with a phoenix should be kept a secret for now, as things would become very complicated if it became known. Hearing these words, Leo let out a sigh of relief. Yura released him and patted him on the shoulder, stating that on the day the exploratory classes ended, he must choose summoning as his major. She told him he possessed the talent to become a summoning hero who would be remembered throughout history. The next morning at the academy, Chloe was walking leisurely through the corridor, raising her hand to cover her mouth and yawning widely. As she was still yawning, a teasing voice sounded from behind her. It was Car, along with Leo, approaching from behind. Car asked if she looked tired. Chloe replied that she had stayed up late reading magic books. Leo, standing next to her, looked at her and asked if she was Chloe Mueller. Without waiting for a confirmation, Leo took out the card he had picked up on the street and showed it to Chloe, recalling the day during the first day of school when the two had bumped into each other on the school grounds. Remembering this scene, Chloe's eyes widened and she exclaimed in recognition. She took her card, quickly thanked him, and stated that it had been him, thanking the new recruit representative. After exchanging a few words, the three quickly arrived at the classroom. As they entered, Chloe asked Leo if it seemed he was planning to attend the magic lecture as well. Leo nodded and replied that since it was still the exploration phase, he wanted to attend as many lectures as possible. Hearing these words, Chloe excitedly exclaimed that it was great because she was only interested in magic and only attending the magic classes. The three quickly found empty seats. Car turned his head slightly and whispered into Leo's ears that the icy girl sitting next to them was aiming for the top spot in the magic department, and her name was Chloe Mueller. Chloe, sitting beside him, heard this and turned to look at Car, Sensing danger, Carr quickly stood up, feeling embarrassed, and said awkwardly that it seemed a bit cold there and he thought he should go to the back. Before he could finish his sentence, a cold force struck him across the face. A huge block of ice suddenly sprouted up in front of Carr, blocking his retreat. Chloe slowly stood up and placed her hand on the icy table, stating coldly to Carr that they would go to the front. After saying this, Chloe grabbed Carr by the hair and began dragging him away. As she was dragging him, she remarked that it seemed he was interested in this class and she would help him find a good spot. Carr was wailing and unable to resist, only managing to cry out Leo's name. Just then, Chelsea's voice rang out from behind Leo. Leo followed the sound and turned his head, seeing that Chelsea and Abad were at the next table, smiling and waving at him. Leo, as a matter of courtesy, smiled in response. Suddenly, he noticed an unusual sound, and his eyes immediately widened in alertness. There were slow footsteps outside the door. The classroom door opened, followed by a voice stating that it was a pleasure to meet them, those participating in the magic class, and that he would be teaching magic for the next year. The teacher slowly entered the classroom. Some of the female students, upon seeing the teacher's appearance clearly, were excitedly exclaiming that he was very handsome. The teacher stood at the front of the class and introduced himself by name as Len Or. Len Or walked to the teacher's desk. He looked at the documents on the desk and stated unhurriedly that before they began today's exploration class, he stopped for a moment, raised his hand, and lightly snapped his fingers. Following Len Or's action, the documents on the desk began flying around the classroom. The documents quickly found their owners, landing in front of each student. At this point, Len Or finished his sentence, stating that they would be taking a theory exam on magic. Hearing this, someone in the class asked in surprise about a test being given on the first day of the exploratory class. Len Or slammed his hand on the table, stating seriously that students who did not meet certain standards could not attend his class, and that this was a basic requirement if they were students of Lumene. After finishing, he instructed them to hand their tests to his assistant, Anna. As soon as he said this, Anna, the first-year magic department assistant professor who was sitting to the side, raised her hand, smiled, and stated that students should hand the completed tests to her. Everyone in the class began looking at the test. Leo, who had been focused on the questions, felt his hands tremble slightly. He thought to himself, questioning if this was the current trend in magic and wondering why the formulas were so complicated. The students began to lower their heads and started working on the test. The faint sound of pen tips scraping across the paper echoed in the classroom. The sand in the hourglass slowly trickled down. After some time, a few people finished their tests. They turned to each other and whispered that it was easier than they had thought, but they questioned the answer to the last question, stating they had solved everything else. Hearing these words, Leo sat silently, thinking to himself that he had only solved one question correctly. Leo stood up to submit his test. As he handed the test to Anna, he remarked that he should have studied more about modern magic before coming here. After handing in his test, Leo did not return to his seat, but instead opened the door and left the room. He said to himself that he should just study magic on his own. In the classroom, the sand in the hourglass had completely run out, signaling that the testing time was over. At the podium, Len Or stated slowly that after 100 years, it seemed that magic had evolved significantly. Magic that used to require a complete understanding of the person could now be used just by memorizing the activation conditions. As he said this, the tests that Anna had finished grading were handed to Len Or, and he snapped his fingers. The tests for each student were returned to their respective places. After this, Len Or continued. However, this progress had unfortunately worsened the overall level of mages. With a raised arm, Len Or brought forth a sudden blinding light that filled the classroom from his palm. As he moved, a magical display resembling a distant galaxy gradually took shape before the excited students. Len Or explained the origin of the magic he had created entirely himself, stating his desire for the students to research and create their own magic, which was the purpose of the test they had just completed. He clarified that the test consisted of 49 questions based on basic memorization, each worth 1 point, and a final question worth 51 points that required analyzing the true origin of magic. He expressed his hope that everyone could become a mage capable of solving such a challenge. Holding her test paper, Chelsea remarked that she finally understood why the last question was the only one she could not solve. She then looked towards the spot where Leo had been sitting, finding it empty except for his test paper neatly placed on the desk. Chelsea felt a pang of sadness, wondering if Leo had given up and lamenting that she had hoped to attend the magic class with him. While she was lost in thought, Anna approached Len Or on the podium and spoke quietly to him. Anna informed the professor that one student had solved the 50th question. Hearing this, Len Or's face lit up with a happy smile. He called out to the class, announcing that someone had achieved a perfect score for the first time in history and asking that person to stand up. Seeing the professor's excitement, a slightly nervous Anna softly clarified that it was not a perfect score. Or sounded doubtful but then accepted the correction, speculating that some questions might have been missed because too much time was spent on the final one. Still, he asked the student to stand. Anna then shook her head and hesitated before explaining that the student had only solved the last question. Or's eyes widened in surprise and he quickly asked for the student's name. Anna consulted Leo's profile and stated it was the student Leo Plov. Or nodded, then looked out at the class and called for student Leo Plov to stand up. Hearing the name, Chloe immediately turned to Carr and asked about Leo's whereabouts. Carr shook his head and whispered that Leo did not appear to be there. At that moment, Chelsea raised her hand hesitantly and reported that student Leo had left after finishing the test. Or seemed slightly surprised by this. The conversation then shifted to the academy cafeteria where Leo's test, worth 51 points, became the subject of discussion. Seated with Celia, eating ice cream, Leo recounted the events. Celia chuckled upon hearing his story, commenting on his leaving after solving only one question. She ate a spoonful of ice cream and then continued, playfully teasing him about being a chick in the summoning class and only solving one question in the magic class. She questioned if he realized he had done something wrong, put down her spoon, and suggested that if his major was knight, he should focus on swordsmanship. Hearing her words, Leo calmly proposed doing some physical training together while continuing to eat his ice cream. Celia, slightly scared by the suggestion, began to stutter, finding the idea a bit much. Before she could finish speaking, a cold voice from above interrupted them. The speaker observed that Leo was in the night department. Both Leo and Celia looked up immediately. The person who had spoken was none other than the teacher, Len. He coldly questioned Leo, asking if he was Leo Plov, the one who had made a fool of his class. He demanded to know why Leo had left after solving only one question, sarcastically asking if the questions were too easy to be worth answering. Leo quickly stood up and explained to the professor that there seemed to be a misunderstanding, stating that he had thought he would not pass the test. Exclaimed in surprise. Leo further clarified that all the questions except the last one were too difficult for him to solve. These words caused to frown slightly. He paused for a moment, seemingly about to speak, but Leo interrupted, explaining that he had learned magic on his own by reading old magic books, and was therefore unfamiliar with modern magic. This answer greatly surprised He mused to himself, wondering if Leo could possibly be someone special. Lost in this thought, impulsively bent down and lifted Leo up. Leo was confused, his eyes wide as he looked directly at the professor. With gleaming eyes, smiled gently and told Leo to follow him for a short while. That's a wrap. The story continues in my next video. Like and subscribe to stay notified.